Hello and welcome to another overview of Big Picture app that we are conducting every year. And now we have 2022, it's February, so it's about time to have another video about what is Big Picture all about. So in these videos, we are in general trying to indicate all the benefits that the tool can bring to your table, to the project management environment in your company. But we are also giving you an overview of all the possibilities. So Big Picture has several modules and we are cramming through all these modules, trying to point the most interesting parts of those. So if you came here to figure out whether Big Picture might be an interesting buy for you, this is absolutely the video that you should stay with. Just before I go into the tool, I'll mention that we at geniusgecko.com are taking care of our customers in terms of project management solutions everywhere inside the Atlassian environment. So we're not only working with Big Picture, but also with other tools. Our main focus has been so far in the project management solutions, but we are expanding also to other services around Jira and Confluence. So if after watching this video, you will figure that maybe you want to have a chat about Big Picture and figure out if this tool is right for you, or you want to talk with us about your particular circumstances and ask us to guide you maybe into what tool will benefit you the most, because Big Picture is definitely not the only one out there, although at this point in time it is the best one in my opinion, then absolutely reach out to us. We will schedule a free call during which we can talk about it. You can ask all the questions you want and we will do our best to answer them. And in the end, if you will be satisfied, you can always get back to us for some training, for some implementation support, or any other services that you might need. All right, having that out of the way, let's focus on the tool itself. So what is Big Picture? Big Picture is a project management app that is available to Jira both in cloud and server version, and of course in data center version as well. How does Big Picture fit into the whole picture of Jira itself? Does Jira have any project management capabilities by itself? Yes, it does. So Jira does a pretty decent work in terms of managing agile projects. In terms of waterfall projects, I would say it's getting better and better all the time, especially since the roadmaps have been introduced into the product itself. In the Cloud Premium version, you will also have advanced roadmaps which allow you to do, again, a little bit more. But for many of our customers, this is still not enough. And that is why they are looking into some more advanced tools that will bring more features, helping you to manage your projects in a specific way. Now, Big Picture is my favorite tool so far because it does a great job covering the three approaches that we are working with most of the time. So the first one is the waterfall approach, right? You probably know what that means. It means you're working with the Gantt chart and you're planning your work ahead of time and then following the execution, modifying as you go, right? Then the second approach is the agile approach. And again, Big Picture does a great job here. Some time ago, it's been heavily advertising itself as a tool that is compliant with the scaled agile framework. So as you can see, or as you can imagine, there are lots of agile features in the tool that actually are helping in managing these kind of projects. But what is most important of all in regards to Big Picture is that it does a really good job connecting the agile and waterfall worlds together. So this is really unique because you might be in a situation where some part of your teams are working agile, but part of your teams are working waterfall, right? So maybe not the whole company did the switch. Another very common scenario is that on some levels you're already working agile, but on some other levels, usually at the top of the hierarchy of the company, you actually need a waterfall approach and a waterfall reporting type, right? So having those two worlds kind of colliding is something that we get to see in the project management world all the time. So if you're in this situation, you are not unique. Actually, most of our customers are not solely waterfall, are not solely agile, they are somewhere in between. And Big Picture is the tool that I think does the best job in trying to connect those two worlds together and make it work. Okay? All right. So let's talk more about the tool itself. The screen that you're looking at right now is what is called the home screen in the Big Picture. And this is the place where you start your journey with Big Picture. Everything that you can see on the screen, every entry on this list over here is called a box. Now, the concept of boxes has been introduced to Big Picture some time ago, and I think it was a great step forward. What is a box? Box is essentially a container for data. So it's up to you to decide what the box is going to be. In the very simple approach, the box might just be a project, right? So for example, this box over here called 8.2 demo, this might be one of my projects in the company. But that is not all what a box can be, because boxes can be stacked on top of one another. So you can create a hierarchy of boxes, which means that you can either have boxes above the box, or you can have boxes below the box or inside the box, right? And that gives you a unique opportunity to create, for example, portfolios of your projects, or you might break down your projects into smaller pieces, still just using boxes, right? So Big Picture allows you to create the different types of boxes and also put them into the hierarchy. That's very, very important. Now, the next step, of course, after having the box created would be to populate the box with data. And of course, we will be looking at that very, very soon. And you can see some summaries of the data that are coming from inside those boxes over here. But what I want to mention right now is that everything you see over here is coming from Jira. So that's why, of course, Big Picture is a Jira app, so that it can reuse the Jira data. And this is a huge part of this tool, because we, for example, get lots of customers that are switching from Microsoft Project coming into the Jira environment. Why? Because having the project management tool over here gives you a unique possibility of instant reporting on your data, because you're not working on some data that is just entered into the system, and now whenever you need to update this data that you have over here, you have to have a status meeting or go ask people how they are doing. No, this is the data that actual developers, for example, or actual people that are maintaining or progressing through your workflows are working on. And whenever they update a task, for example, an issue, change the status, put a comment on it, report the time on that issue, this is immediately reflected over here, so that anytime you come into the tool, anytime you visit Big Picture, you have up-to-date information about what is happening in your organization. And that's a huge, huge thing. All right, so again, this is our starting point. The list that I can see over here is basically all the boxes that are in my system. You can see that some of them are expandable. So I can, for example, expand this one, and I can see that this box is divided into 2 different stages. I can expand my demo box, for example, over here. I can see that it's divided into 5 different program increments. Each one of those program increments is still divided into smaller pieces called iterations. So as you can see, I can build quite a robust structure over here, and there is actually no limit to the levels of hierarchy of boxes that you want to stack on top of one another. That, of course, connects with quite a lot of different possibilities. Now, what would a normal user see over here? So I am the admin of this instance, I can see all the boxes, but the normal user would actually come over here to this home view of Big Picture, and he or she would only see the boxes that have something to do with that person, right? So basically all the boxes that this person has access to or has been given access to, right? So of course, this is always a good starting point for the person. And of course, from here, I can navigate to now the part of the box that is interesting to me. So I'll be working today mostly with the project BP 8.2, because we've been using this box to record an update with the 8.2 new features of the tool. And by going to these 3 dots, I can easily switch to one of the modules inside that box. So I will give you a quick overview of all the modules so that you can understand what are the tool's strengths and how you can use it to help you manage your projects in the best possible manner. So first I will switch to the overview module, which is kind of a shorter version of the home module. So you can see that over here, the box we are in the context of has switched to project BP 8.2. It's not home view anymore. And now we can see just this box at the top. And if this box has sub boxes, and ours does, then we also will see sub boxes over here. We will also get some summaries for those. As you can see, some data over here is missing, especially in terms of time tracking, but we are getting some data in the status column. So for example, this one will show you that in stage 1, 60% of the tasks are not started yet, 20% are in progress, and another 20% are already completed, right? So pretty good basic reporting that is already available here in the overview module. And the same goes for the time tracking if you would choose to use the time tracking, because of course it's not mandatory. Let's switch to something more important. So by the way, first we will scroll through all the features that are more waterfall oriented, and then we will switch to the agile features of BigPicture. So the Gantt module is something that is heavily used by most of the users. Let's talk a little bit about what Gantt has to offer. So of course, if you look at the Gantt, the general view is pretty standard. On the left side, you have a table-like view. On the right side, you have a Gantt chart. If you look at the Gantt chart, you can see that, of course, we have some dependencies visible on the Gantt. Of course, you have parent-child relationships, which are also indicated here as a hierarchy of tasks. So, of course, you can build your hierarchies here as well. There are actually two different ways of building the hierarchy. The one is what I usually call the manual hierarchy. It's a very simple way, although it's a little bit less resilient when it comes to changes in your data. The other one is to use structure builders, a little bit more advanced, but definitely preferred if you want to keep the data intact and structured properly in the long run. But let's focus on the basics first. So, one of the most important things that, of course, the Gantt allows you to do is to manage the tasks inside your project with a waterfall approach. You can add tasks from this level if you want to, so you don't have to do it through Jira. Even though all those tasks are coming from your Jira projects, you can easily add tasks through the internal BigPicture menu as well. If you want to do some more advanced things with your tasks, one of those would definitely be to change the period mode, which kind of decides that tasks are scheduled automatically or manually. So there is a built-in automatic scheduling available in BigPicture, which is based on the dependencies that are available here and also on the hierarchy, on the parent-child relationship between your tasks. You can also create baselines on the Gantt so that when you want to have a look at how your project plan looked like before, you can always go back to the baseline. You can also use the grouping functionality, which is a pretty easy and cool way of restructuring your view that you have over here. So, currently we are looking just at the list of my tasks and they are structured as the hierarchy. But if I, for example, want them to be displayed in a completely different manner and, for example, grouped by the statuses that they are in, I can do it with a couple of clicks. So grouping functionality is something that is not used by beginners, but it is a functionality that should be used by everyone because it adds a lot in terms of the visibility, readability, and reportability of the data that you have inside over here. Moving on, you will also be able to use the view section over here to, for example, turn on the visibility of overdue tasks. So this will quickly highlight any of your tasks inside your plan that are overdue, and obviously you should do something about it. You can also take a look at your critical path. So all the tasks belonging to the critical path will also get highlighted and you can identify them super quickly. You can also have a look at your period warnings. So for example, this one, this yellow, is giving me a warning that maybe this task should be longer because probably the children belong to that task are scheduled here in the future, right? I should make this task a little bit longer. And of course, there are ways of doing it automatically as well. There are a couple of options here allowing you to define how the label of the task is going to look like, what information is going to be shown over here, and also how the colors are being managed. So you can color by status or you can do the manual coloring. And then, for example, I can manually say that this task should be of this color, green color, for whatever reason, right? And you can do manual coloring as well, which surprisingly is quite important for many people. Then you have some settings regarding the dependencies that are visible, but I'm not going to get into the details of this over here. Instead, I will mention that over here in the Gantt view, you can already have some sneak peek into your resource management. So if you're doing resource planning, this is already a good starting point. But later on, of course, we will also have a look at the resources module of Big Picture as well. One of the things that is definitely worth mentioning over here is which data you're looking at over here. Again, because everything is coming from Jira, you are able to display every field that you have in Jira right in this view. How to do this? Well, you can either use Manage Columns icon over here and just search for your Jira fields with this one, or you can manage your column views and then just quickly switch between one column view and another. So currently we are looking at hybrid view, but if I switch to time tracking, you will see that I will get a different set of fields available over here. If I switch to teams, again, I will get a different set of fields available over here. So managing your column views, and you can define them by yourself, of course, if you want to, is a very quick way of creating views that you will be able to reuse later on all the time. Pretty important functionality. Then another thing that Gantt allows you to do is to play around with the alternative scenarios. So imagine a situation where, for example, you have a project plan and you know that some big change is coming somewhere in the future, let's say in 1 month. Maybe one of your vendors is going to join the party or leave the party, and you need to do some reshuffling of your tasks. Maybe someone is joining or leaving your team and you need to do some reshuffling of your tasks. This is where the alternative scenarios come into place. We can create a new scenario, play around with it. It's kind of being done offline, not synchronizing with Jira automatically. And then after looking at the final result of your alternative scenario, you can decide whether you like it or not. And if you like it, you can merge it with your live scenario. And if you don't like it, you can just discard it and come back to whatever you had before. So that's a pretty cool functionality that the Gantt module allows you to play around with as well. What else is worth mentioning? I think the last part we will visit over here is the info bar on the right side. So the info bar is a place which helps you search for some specific elements of your project plan. And there are 4 tabs over here. The first one allows you to search for tasks that are connected with a special kind of a dependency. The second one, again, will list all the overview tasks, right? So this is a second option that allows you to quickly find them. You can see where they are. You can click on the task to get it highlighted here on the Gantt. Of course, I could make this one, for example, smaller to focus more on a Gantt chart if I wanted to. I can see the number of days that the task is late by. So all very useful. Another thing is to quickly find the milestones. If you have any milestones in your project plan, and we have one over here, again, I can quickly click here. It gets highlighted over here, put into focus, put into view, so I can quickly identify where it is. And also the critical path that we also had in one of the other options in the view section. And again, I can just click on a task, get it highlighted, and see which tasks belong to my critical path, whether I should do something about them or not, whether I'm happy with my critical path or not, and of course, manage it properly. All right, so that is all in terms of the Gantt, a super quick overview. Of course, there are many more things to say about the Gantt chart. We could talk about how to reuse the data in several different boxes. We could talk more about the hierarchy and building the hierarchy. We could talk more about dependencies and what different kinds of dependencies there are. But this is not the point of this video. Therefore, we are moving on to the next module, which is going to be the resources module. So resources module is usually quite tightly connected with the Gantt because both of those are, I would say, strictly for the waterfall approach. Especially the resources module is really connected with a waterfall approach because if you're working agile, you're working with teams, you're planning on the team level, and you're usually doing the planning on a board module, which we will also visit a little bit later. In a resources module, you also are able to do the team planning, but it's a little bit different type of a team planning. So hopefully you will see it very soon. Okay, so what is happening in the resources module? Let me switch to the individual view first. So in the individual view, you are able to look at the data that Big Picture is again taking from Jira. This data is all around the time tracking feature of Jira. So Big Picture is reusing that information. If you're not using time tracking in Jira, this module basically will be useless to you because without those numbers, it doesn't show anything interesting. But with the time tracking, you will be able to see over here how much time is planned for a certain person, how much time the certain person has already spent working on tasks, whether the progress of those tasks is good or bad. And it's again an important information for you as a project manager maybe. You will be able to see what is the availability of people in terms of general capacity. And also you will be able to quickly identify which tasks are contributing to the time that is booked for a particular person. So all this information is displayed in those numbers over here. It might be quite overwhelming if you look at it without any perspective. So I might, for example, simplify it to you and do something like this. And this is an easy view to digest. You can basically see that Yara over here is having 8 hours per day planned over here. Here he has a window of no work planned. And here again, he has some work planned for the next 6 working days, right? So now we might be wondering, okay, what kind of work does he have? So I might turn on the visibility of tasks and I can see, aha, there is a task over here. There is a task planned for him over here. But there is also a task planned over here and it says 0. Why? Well, because this task, if I click on it, you will see that it doesn't have any estimates, right? So if there are no estimates, Big Picture will not be able to say how much time the task is going to take. Hence, we get zeros over here. So that's why I said that if you don't work with estimates and time tracking, you won't be getting any meaningful numbers in the resources module, all right? So from this view, you can identify how much time the person is booked for. So we can quickly see whether you need more resources in your project or whether you're maybe overstaffed and you can let some people go and move to other projects. You can also do the planning on the level of your teams. So if that would be needed, it's here. The team-based planning is actually a pretty important feature over here because it allows you to do the long-term planning in most of the cases. In some of the cases, I've been working with customers that actually do the current planning only on the level of teams, and that works over here as well. So the long-term planning totally makes sense because very often we were getting asked by our customers, okay, so if I can do the planning individual, that's fine, but if I'm doing the plan for the next 12 months, I have no idea which individual my tasks are going to be assigned to in December next year, right? Because I don't have that level of details yet. So I need some way of doing the rough planning. So that's why we were using the teams to do the rough planning. And then at some point in time, when you were getting close to the execution of your project, we were switching to the individual planning if needed, for example, because as I said, some customers are staying with the team-based planning until the end. Another thing that is very cool over here in the resources module is that you can also do the skill-based planning. So there are skills available or roles, however you want to call them or use them. And if you want to do the planning per skills or roles, this is also available. And I believe that we even have a separate video regarding that on our YouTube channel. So if you're interested in that, have a look at the possibilities of the skill-based planning over there in that video. Moving on. So this is resources. The next one I'm going to mention is Teams. Although Teams is not really connected to the waterfall, it's pretty universal, but it definitely plays a role in the resources module because as we could see, you can do the team-based planning over there. So the teams have to come from somewhere. And this is the module where you define your teams. I'm actually going to spend just a minute over here to say that you can create the list of teams available in your box over here. You can have global teams that you can reuse across multiple boxes, multiple projects. So that's a very good thing as well. And when you're creating a team, you always get to define the people that will belong to the team. And anytime you add a person to the team, you get to say how much time the person will spend working for this particular team. So it might be 100%, but you might also have an environment where people are working on several projects at the same time or belonging to several teams at the same time. So it's very important to note that over here, you can change this percentage to something else, right? So you might say that person is spending 50% of their time on one project, 30% on the second project, and 20% maybe on overhead activities, right? In one of the last updates, Big Picture has added this exclamation mark, which basically is telling you when the person is over allocated. So the total allocation of the person goes above 100%, which is such an important indicator over here. You will see that it appears in my instance very often because we haven't been looking at this in our demo boxes. But in your instance, when you see this exclamation mark, it definitely will be an indicator that there is something wrong and it's worth having a look at the other allocations of this individual in other boxes. Finishing up with resources and teams, I will also mention that Big Picture allows you also to manage the time or the availability of those people and those resources. So you can manage your workload plan. So you can decide, for example, how many hours every day the people will be available. You can have several workload plans. The standard one, for example, 8 hours every day from Monday to Friday. But then you might also have non-standard workload plans for people, for example, that are working half-time, for people that are working irregular hours, whatever is needed. Another thing that Big Picture allows you to do are holiday plans. So you might create holiday calendars for your people. And again, you might have a default one, but you might also create more. So if you, for example, have employees from several different countries, you can create different calendar with different bank holidays, church holidays that each of these countries have, and assign them to proper people so that everybody is working in the way that is appropriate. Another thing that Big Picture allows you to do is manage absences. So you can record times when people are out of work in Big Picture as well. So if it's holidays, if it's maternity leave, if it's sick leave, it's all available over here. So quite a lot of features regarding the resource management, which are hidden in the administration tab, which I could go right over here, but I don't think we want to spend much time over there in this video. All right, moving on, the last two I will visit on our way out of the waterfall approach is the calendar module. So the calendar module is quite fresh in Big Picture, but in general, it allows you to have a look at your work in a calendar-like manner. So over here, you have a view of the whole month. Of course, I can switch between months from here or even by scrolling like that. The calendar view basically tells you which tasks are planned for each day. So for every day, I can see at least 2 tasks as those bars. But if I have more, I can click here and see actually the whole list of tasks that are planned for that particular day. So each day I can see exactly what is planned for this day, what is supposed to be happening, and who is supposed to be working on the items that are planned for that day. Of course, there are a lot more features here, so I can even do some simple replanning if I want to from this level. I can also change the view to the end date mode, so that view that we saw previously was a little bit too cluttered. You can actually change it to the end date mode, and then you can only see the task scheduled for one day, which is the last day of that particular task. So that might be sometimes better for some users. And also on the right side, we have a very handy upcoming tasks panel that again shows you exactly which tasks are waiting for the attention of the team or teams working on this project for each date that is starting from today. So that's what the calendar allows you to do. And the last part is the reports module. And the reports module allows you to, of course, create some reports regarding the data that you have in your box. So remember that we are always in the context of the particular box, and any data inside that box can be put into some reports over here. Again, in one of the recent updates, Big Picture allowed us to finally add the reports without the Big Picture Enterprise extension. So now I can click this pencil over here and I can edit all of those reports. I can also add a new report. And if I try to add a new report, you will see that there are now 4 different types of them. There is a task report that basically allows you to group the data by specific parameters. Pretty handy, I would say. And you can create a pie chart report, you can create a bar chart report. So visually, it's also quite appealing. And then you also have 3 reports that allows you to create the risk matrix report, team dependencies, and dependencies report. So these are the ones you can see here in this middle column. The one over here, the risk matrix, is kind of like a miniature view of your risks, which we will visit in a moment as well. And the dependencies and team dependencies are all about the connectability between elements for different teams, and also elements that are connected but coming from different boxes, right? So again, if you're working with several boxes, your project is broken down into several smaller boxes. This one might show you what are the dependencies between those boxes. And as we all know, dependencies are always quite risky to have. So it's very important to have a way of identifying where they are and making sure that all of them are managed properly so that they don't create any additional risk for our project. All right, let's have a look at the risks module as well. In this version of Big Picture that I have currently, there is a bug that actually doesn't scale the task bars properly. So if I have a task with a very long name like this one, you can see that it takes quite a lot of my screen, and then I have to scroll to the right to see the rest of my risks. That's why I will actually switch to the different box where I don't have these long names. So a different box might look like this one. For risks, you have this risk matrix that is showing you values of consequence right up here and probability. So every risk is defined by those two values. And then you have the levels of consequence, levels of probability, and the matrix, of course, is telling you where your risks are located in terms of those values. Of course, if I have trivial over here and very high, maybe I want to have it a little bit differently. So let's invert the probability axis. So now I have trivial and almost none here at this corner. So that is telling me that this is a corner of very low risk. And of course, the opposite corner, this one would be the corner of very high risk. You can see that my coloring also indicates that. So these ones are more reddish, these ones are more greenish, and those in the middle are yellowish. The risks over here are, of course, again, Jira issues. So it's very useful to understand this because that allows you to, for example, manage the fields that are available on those issues. If you need some special fields describing your risk, like a risk mitigation plan, person responsible for managing the risk reserve budget, for example, that could all be added to those issues so that you can capture those values as you need. The feature that I like really a lot is that you can hit the magnifying glass over here and put that single risk kind of on display on the big screen. This is a great feature for risk review meetings, for example. When you're sitting with your team and reviewing the risks, you might want to pull it up like this, discuss the risk, even make some adjustments over here because the text fields, for example, and numerical fields are inline editable over here. And then you can switch, for example, to the next risk and start talking about the next one. So that's a very, very interesting feature. But if you would not be a fan of the matrix view, there is also a standard table view right here below the matrix. And actually the matrix can be switched off if you want to, if you don't want to use it. So you can also look at your risk in a table-like manner, no problem at all. All right, so that would conclude kind of the waterfall part of Big Picture. But for those of you that would prefer to work in the more agile manner, let's have a look at some additional modules. Let's then have a look at the roadmap module, which is the starting point of our agile journey. And I will have to switch the box over here to the previous one we were looking at because we will have some data over there. And here in this roadmap module, you are able to do something that is called the objective-based planning. So of course, that means that you can create goals or you can create objectives for your teams or in general for your milestones in your project, for your boxes in your project, so that the team or teams can follow those objectives so that they can give them guidance of where we want to be, where we want to get to at the end of every step in our journey. So, for example, you can see that my project BP 8.2 is divided into those two stages, stage 1 and stage 2. We don't have any goals or objective plans for stage 2, but we have some for stage 1. And you can see that I have a section of main objectives over here, and I also have a section of BP 82 team over here, indicating that you can either create objectives that are general, but you can also create objectives that are team specific. Each of those objectives are supposed to be a little bit higher level than the team's tasks that indicate exactly what work has to be done. These are supposed to be high-level goals that, again, are guideposts, right? So that's why you can even create those objectives as just text. They don't have to be Jira issues. I have one over here. You can see that it has an issue key. So it's coming from Jira, but these three over here are just text objectives. They do not exist outside of Big Picture, but that's completely fine. What you can do later on with those objectives, if your box is already in progress, and this one is, you can see that it's blue, so this one is in progress, I can then mark my objectives with different statuses. So for example, I can say that this one has been completed, and I immediately get some completion values over here. I can say that this one, for example, has been failed, and then I get a choice. I can just keep it in the current place, or if I'm not giving up, we failed, but we will try again during the next stage, we might continue the objective. It will automatically get copied to the next box. I might also say that one of the objectives has been abandoned, which means that we totally gave up. We thought that this was a stupid idea, or maybe market situation has changed. We needed to scrap that. So it's gone from our platter as well. So that's what you can do with your objectives. You might even mark the objective completion with this slider over here, although I am personally not a huge fan of that, right? So this is the place where you give direction to your team. Then when your team already has the direction, you can go to some more down-to-earth planning, right? So for example, you might switch to the scope module, which is a great place to do some grooming of your backlog, right? So the teams have their objectives. They might now take those objectives and start creating tasks, user stories, epics, whatever is needed that will fulfill those objectives, that will indicate which work has to be completed to reach the objective, right? So this is how you would start building the backlog. It can be done from over here, so you can create tasks or subtasks from over here. You can then display the columns that you want to be updating, and of course change all the values in those columns as you go. Some inline editing is available over here, so all the text and numerical fields will be editable. All the date fields will be editable here as well, because this is something that has been added in one of the recent updates of Big Picture. And of course, if you need other columns, for example, story points that are not visible here currently, it will be very easy to add it either through here, story points, right? Or I might already have a different view over here in my column views that would show me story points. I think I don't. So even if I switch to Teams view, I will not get my story points here. Yeah, I don't, right? But we could. And that would be a perfect place to groom our backlog. Now, when the backlog is already ready to be planned, then we might be switching to the board module, where we will get a very nice view of, first of all, our sub boxes of the main box. So in our case, again, stage 1 and stage 2. And then we have the view of our teams and the tasks that are planned inside those stages for each team, or still being unassigned over here, right? So the whole backlog that we have just groomed in the scope module would be available over here. And now from this side, I can easily plan the tasks on the left side. So if I, for example, want to say that BP82 team has to complete this task, I might just grab this task, drag it to this team, and the task would be added to their backlog. If those tasks have estimates, either in hours or man days, or in story points, we can always have the indicators here showing us the work that is currently planned is actually going. So these are called totals. If I switch to team capacity, I can see, yes, BP82 team is a little bit over allocated currently. So that's an interesting indicator, of course. I'm doing the planning. But then when I'm in the execution phase, I might switch to work progress. And as you can see, I can choose story points, the counting just tasks, or using the hourly estimates, so the time spent, to see how the work is progressing and whether we are on track or not. So a very, very useful thing again to have over here. Of course, if you want to, you can also do multi-select over here and then grab a whole bunch of tasks and drag them to whenever you need them to be. You can also do the capacity planning for your team. So this is what I meant when I said that if you're doing the agile approach, you probably don't need the resources module, because you would be doing the capacity planning probably over here. Yeah, I would almost forgot to mention that you can also have dependencies visible here in your project plan in the board, so that you can again quickly identify, first of all, the dependencies across teams. So for example, this is a dependency within the same stage across two teams, new awesome team and BP82 team. And you can also have dependencies between elements belonging to different stages, which is also very important to note and identify, because this indicates that some part of the work has to be completed, so that in the next stage or in the next iteration or in the next sprint, you can start another piece of work. Talking about sprints, one of the very cool features that you can configure over here is that instead of stages that we have in this example, you might actually have sprints and boxes representing your sprints, so to say. And you might also synchronize those boxes with your real Jira sprints, so that whenever you change things over here, your Jira sprints actually are getting updated. And it also works the other way. So if you update your Jira sprint, for example, in terms of its content, then the data over here will also get updated. And that's a very cool feature, also allowing you to have here in big picture a view that is showing you what are multiple teams working on within the same sprint or sprints, which is a little bit harder to do outside of big picture in just pure Jira out of the box. And one last thing that I just want to mention before we wrap this up is that I told you that Big Picture does a pretty decent way of connecting the worlds of Waterfall and Agile. How does it do it? Well, the very simple way of explaining this is that you can do the low-level planning on the board right over here. And the teams that are doing the work, like for example, the software teams, design teams, whatever you have working at the lower level of your projects, can be working the agile fashion over here. But then you can also go to your Gantt and you can display those boxes on the Gantt as well. So if I go over here and enable time boxes, I will see that my stage 1 and stage 2 are visible over here and they get highlighted. And of course I can zoom in a little bit to highlight them a little bit more, right? So the setting over here in this box is not actually completed, so you will not see it exactly, but what you can do is you can turn on the specific feature inside those boxes called stage 1 and stage 2 in my case, so that any task that is assigned to this box will automatically be scheduled for the whole duration of that box. So then you will have the breakdown of all the data from within those boxes scheduled exactly where the duration of that box is, and that would give you a pretty good Gantt-like overview of what is happening inside your project throughout all the sub-boxes of that project, whether it's stages, whether it's sprints, whether it's program increments, quarters, months, whatever you will do, right? So that would be a very good way of creating a waterfall-like view of everything that is happening inside your project. And then, of course, remember that you can stack boxes on top of one another, so you can pull that up into your portfolio view as well and try to show it over there, maybe with some filtering, because maybe you don't need all the elements, maybe you just need the parent elements over there, like epics, features, or anything else, any other issue type that you might have. But still, it's a pretty good way of creating the view for your managers, for your C-level employees, directors, whoever will require that kind of view or would like to see the data in a little bit more aggregated way. All right, I think that was quite a journey, so I will finish it right over here. Again, Big Picture is quite a robust tool. It's maybe not as advanced, at least in terms of the waterfall management, as the Microsoft project, but it has other benefits. And if you want to learn more about the tool, do reach out to us. All the details will be found in the description of this video. Hopefully this has been helpful and we will hear or see each other soon somewhere in the future. Thank you very much for listening.